good morning, good afternoon, good evening, of course, depending on where you're hearing my voice from. This is the Biafran Golden Child, and I'm super glad, yes, to, interact with us today. Hope you guys are all doing well. Yes, and I thank you for most of the feedbacks that I get when you hear my audios on the Biafra Superstars media. Yes, it's always a pleasure when we, come and talk about Biafra and issues concerning Biafra. It gives us a thrill, gives me a thrill, yes, to know that someone out there, a fellow Biafran, a freedom lover, and a Biafran extract is reading, hearing me, you know. So, yesterday, the Biafra Superstars media got across to me, and they told me about some of the, uh, you know, uh, responses and comments that my last audio generated. I mean, the audio about, Bruce Mayrock and the so-called commissioning of, a memorial for him at Enugu State by the widow of, the Biafran warlord, Bianca unknown. So I took pains to go through all the comments, and I must confess that I'm highly flabbergasted at some of the things that I saw. Yes, in the first instance, I want to apologize to all those who felt particularly unhappy, who felt that yes, there was no need actually beaming the light or bringing Bianca Ono on the flashlights and the clear lights, making her a sign of show in Biafra Superstars media, especially because we know that she is not particularly proud and not particularly, inspiring as far as the redeclared United States of Biafra is concerned. We know, of course, that there has been a very massive suspicion. Yes, suspicion yet to be completely erased that she had hands in, the betrayal, subsequent arrest of our Prime Minister Simon Ekpa. Of course, we know equally that times when it mattered most, we know she had vigorously and condescendingly, denied the United States of Biafra and issues concerning Biafra. Yes. And so to those people who felt, don't give her any mention here, don't give her any introduction here, don't, uh, talk about her in positive tones here because she has not lived up to expectation, even though being the widow of our, Field Marshal, late Duvel Emeko Dumegu Ojukwu. So, ladies and gentlemen, this audio today, it's a retrospect, because I want to put the record straight. In the first instance, yes, I know Bianca. She was 2 years my uh, well, I was 2 years ahead of her at the University of Enugu way back then, and I know her. Yes. Of course, we know her background. We knew her even before she married, our own Dame Odumegu Ojukwu late. Of course, we know, yes, we've known each other, but she was, by far, younger and junior to me when I was in school, way back then, 2 years back at UNEC Enugu. And so, yes, I don't want to what has happened. I mean, talking about the so-called commissioning, of Bruce Mayrock, memorabilia, or what you might call memento. I don't want it to breed unnecessary arguments or impugn anything about my character or what the Biafra Golden Child represents. In the first instance, yes, we share the same alumni, but that's where it ends. That's where it ends. Yes, that's where it ends. And of course, sincerely, I'm not happy about the recent postulations and gesticulations and propaganda that is coming from her and is alleged to be coming from her, especially that she doesn't believe that Biafra is a reality. She thinks it's a mirage. She thinks, of course, that people are going to outgrow it. She thinks that, United States of Biafra should align with the zoo government because she believes things will get better. Of course, we know that she's working in tandem with Professor Charles Soludo, the Anambra State governor, who has both of them are actually, putting their acts together to ensure that Emiloko comes back in 2027. Of course, their hands are deep into the Emiloko agenda come 2027. But of course, that's politics for them. It's not politics for us. We don't belong to the zoo. We belong to the United States of Biafra. We belong to the really declared sovereign United States of Biafra. So I want to put the record straight. The only reason why I mentioned Bianca in that story was because, of course, we talk about issues concerning Biafra. We talk about things concerning Biafra. I told you Biafra is our way of life, is our culture, and any issue, any news concerning Biafra is very pertinent to us. It's pertinent to our heart, and so we must highlight it. We must bring it to the fore so that Biafrans will know that things are happening in Biafra land. Biafrans will know that yes, we will give them a blow-by-blow account of what is happening, especially in the Biafra land. So no matter what character is involved, no matter the personality or persona of the messenger or characters involved in any of these messages, we try to give it an undiluted, we make it a frank and transparent discussion. So I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you hurt a lot of you who have said, bringing in Bianca into that story made the Bruce Mayrock, testimony look like, it was a small affair. Maybe you didn't hear me there. I think what I'm trying to say, in effect, is that bringing Bruce Mayrock's story and aligning it with the so-called commissioning of a memorabilia built on his behalf, whether it's ongoing, whether it's completed, was wrong. Because of course, Bruce Mayrock on his own deserves a very special mention in Biafra. So, ladies and gentlemen, gear up. Let's set the record straight. Let's set the record straight. It's very important that we appreciate people who stood out when it mattered most. People who were there for Biafra. People who, despite their well-placed positions, people who were living in sophisticated homes, people who lived far away, but who were touched by the plight of the children of Biafra, who was touched by the aggressiveness of the Nigerian government against peace-loving people of Biafra, people who were touched not because they had anything to gain, not because they had anything to lose. No, but they just felt it wasn't right. How can the world be looking? How can the world be watching? How can leaders from superpowers, how can the whole world, including the United Nations, be watching while a people were being devastated, bombed, genocide? I mean, there were people who were touched. There were people who felt it wasn't right. Their humanity was threatened. Yes, they just felt, no, it shouldn't happen. This can't be happening. No. Even though it's somewhere a remote place of Africa, even though it's somewhere in Nigeria, even though it concerns people from the Southeast, these are human beings. These are human beings who should not just be deleted like that. How can you pronounce a genocide on people and the whole world is watching? Superpowers, United Kingdom had it on its brain. The UK had it carrying the propaganda, defending the retired Deragowana administration, saying no, it wasn't just, it was a mere little scheme. It wasn't that too serious, no genocide involved. It's just a secessionist attempt by, disgruntled elements led by Major Ojukwu. I mean, it's not about anything serious. Britain downplayed it. The United Kingdom downplayed a massacre. What was a genocide against the Biafran people? And so when such people speak, when such people act, when such people come out making it obvious that they dislike this, it was against their humanity. It was against what human beings stood for, what the world represented. It was against the convention, United Nations Conventions on Human Rights. It was against the sustenance and survival of people. Yes, it was a genocide. So people spoke. Those who spoke, we must recognize them. They are heroes and heroines of Biafra. And so, ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about Bruce Mayrock. Bruce Mayrock, yes, we have heard about him. Maybe we didn't do enough about him. Maybe I didn't tell you enough because, of course, I brought in this personality, this character of Bianca, commissioning something about him, and it looked like, this wasn't right. Of course, why would you bring a hater of the Biafran people? Why would you bring a saboteur of the Biafran people? Why would you bring somebody whom everybody have come to realize does not like Biafra? Somebody who works for the zoo, somebody who is content to be in the zoo. Why do you bring them and give them such a very powerful position? But you paint them in such a light concerning issues of Biafra. I think to that extent, I apologize to everybody. I apologize to my well wishers. I apologize to all those who are listening to me. I apologize. It wasn't deliberate. But in my zeal to talk about the news concerning Biafra, in my views to articulate happiness within Biafra, in my views, in my zeal to tell the world about Biafra, I had to mention that so-called commission. And in recent times, I've just been drawn. My attention has drawn to the fact that even the commission has not fully taken place. It's still in the pipeline. It's still ongoing, but it's not our business now. It's no longer our business now because our business now is talking about Bruce Mayrock and what the Biafra people, the United States of Biafra, our chief of staff and deputy prime minister, yes. What is she doing? What is Dr. Ngozi Orabueze saying about Bruce Mayrock? What is she saying about Bruce Mayrock? I think that is more important than whoever is commissioning and not commissioning any memorabilia, any monument for Bruce Mayrock. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get it straight. Keep the record straight. Bruce Mayrock was a 20-year-old Jewish American. Yes, he was Jewish American medical student who set himself ablaze in front of the United Nations building in New York City on May 30th, 1969. Why did he do this? He did this to protest the genocide and starvation of Biafrans during the Nigerian Civil War. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayrock was deeply disturbed by the images of starving Biafran children and the Nigerian government's deliberate policy of starvation, which he believed was equivalent to genocide. The young man's mind was completely devastated. He was in a state of unbelief. He couldn't fathom why the whole world was watching, why the Nigerian government could bring out such anti-people policies. I mean, it was genocide as far as it was concerned. It was a deliberate attempt to wipe out the whole, Biafrans, children, elderly, sick, peace-loving people, civilians. He saw the pogrom, so to speak. It was a pogrom. And so Bruce Mayrock was so hot right inside him. And he decided to act. He said, no, to keep quiet is aiding and abetting. To remain silent, that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. He remembered the mantra of late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., civil rights leader in America, United States. He remembered what Martin Luther said, that injustice anywhere, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And they should be condemned totally. And refusing to speak. Refusing to speak when you know that an injustice was being applied, when you know that injustice was being upheld, when you know injustice was declared or enshrined anywhere, your refusal to speak is equivalent to your outright support for such injustice. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And so Bruce Mayrock, was deeply disturbed by the images of starving Biafran children and the Nigerian government's deliberate policy of starvation, which he believed was equivalent to genocide. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, let's know one or two things about, some key facts about Bruce Mayrock. Yes, his birth and background. Yeah. Bruce Mayrock was born on May 6, 1949. Mayrock was a Jewish American student who had previously studied at Hofstra University and Columbia University's Jewish Theological Seminaries. So he was a product of the seminary. And you can imagine what it means. He was a Jewish Theological Seminary student. Of course, he wanted to be, maybe a rabbi. Maybe he wanted to be, you know, uh, a distinguished, preacher of the Jewish religion too. Very disciplined young man. His protest and sacrifice. Bruce Mayrock set himself on fire after writing letters to American senators. He wrote letters to American senators, to the US president, and the United Nations. What was he telling them? He was calling for aid to the Biafran people. Yes, he had a big sign. He created a big sign, a placard, you might say, where he wrote these words, indelible words. He wrote these indelible words. Yes, he said, "You must stop the genocide. Please save 9 million Biafrans," quote and unquote. Yes, Bruce Mayrock. Yes, he wrote, get this straight. Mayrock set himself on fire after writing letters to American senators, to the US president and the United Nations, calling for aid to the Biafran people. His sign read, quote, "You must stop this genocide. Please save 9 million Biafrans," unquote. That was the placard he had on his chest. And he wrote to them, he carried this placard, he was viewed, he was snapped, he was photographed, people saw him. But of course, but of course, the US senators were silent. Of course, the US president did not respond. Of course, the United Nations were maintained a graveyard silence. So unfortunately, Bruce Mayrock decided to take a fatal decision. He said, "If you don't want to listen to me, if you don't want to read my sign, if you don't want to recognize my placard, if you don't accede to my appeal that you save 9 million Biafrans, you stop killing people, starving them, children, and all that, then of course, if my words cannot speak for me, if my placard cannot work for me, if my voice cannot speak loud enough, then maybe when you see what I've done as a protest to your deadly silence, as a protest to your graveyard silence, then maybe maybe then you would respond." And so the young man of 20 years, Bruce Mayrock, poured gasoline all over his body in front of the United States building in New York City and lit himself aflame. Bruce Mayrock lit himself and he became a walking inferno. He became a walking inferno, burning red, red, thick fire with flames all over, smoke all over. He burned himself. Yes, Bruce Mayrock. Bruce Mayrock set himself ablaze. Ladies and gentlemen, for the United States of Biafra, for the Biafran people, for the genocide against Biafra, for the starving children, and for all the wicked atrocities committed against Biafra, Bruce Mayrock set himself aflame, and he died shortly after midnight on May 30th, 1969. Ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Mayrock died shortly after midnight on May 30th, 1969, due to severe burns all over his body. His sacrifice, his sacrifice did not go unnoticed. He burnt himself and he died after midnight on May 30th, 1969, due to severe burns. His sacrifice has been remembered by the Biafran people, and a monument was planned in his honor. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the impact and recognition of Bruce Mayrock's, sacrifice, fatal sacrifice for Biafra? Ladies and gentlemen, freedom lovers, fellow Biafrans, Bruce Mayrock's actions drew international attention to the humanitarian crisis in Biafra, where an estimated 4 million people died due to starvation and conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, when this man spoke, when he carried his placard, when he moved around, when he wrote letters to the U.S. Senate, United States Senate, to the U.S. President, to world leaders, to United Nations, his letters had no recognition. There was no impact. His message that was loud and clear on his placard had no meanings. When people read, quote, "You must stop the genocide. Please save 9 million Biafrans," unquote. It didn't touch them. But ladies and gentlemen, as soon as Bruce Mayrock died after midnight of 30th June 1969, due to severe burns all over his body, 360 degrees burns, Mayrock's actions drew international attention to the humanitarian crisis in Biafra, where an estimated 4 million people died due to starvation and conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, he drew more attention dead than he did when he lived. And this young man became a classic hero, yes, a saint, a knight of Biafra. And it was decided there by the Biafran leader and leaders that he must be immortalized. He must be crowned a hero, international hero, a friend of Biafra, when Biafra, United States of Biafra, will be achieved. Ladies and gentlemen, the Biafran war context. Maybe most of us don't remember, but the Nigerian Civil War fought between Nigeria and the secessionist state of Biafra lasted from 1967 to 1970. The conflict resulted from political, ethnic, and cultural tensions, with the Nigerian government imposing a blockade that led to widespread famine and civilian casualties. That is, let's put Biafran war in context here. We're saying that Nigerian Civil War, that Biafran war, where Nigeria declared genocide against Biafra. It lasted. People who were not prepared for war, innocent people who were going about their businesses, people who were chased away from their domains because of, suspicions of being the ones who, planned the coup that upstaged Nigerian politicians, especially that led to the death, of senior politicians in the north, the Sultan, and the then Prime Minister, Alhaji Tafawa Balewa. Yes, this the military coup of late Kaduna Chukuma Nzogu, who was more Hausa than a Yamri, who was described as a completely Hausa Southerner, who spoke Hausa better than the Hausa man, who ate like the Hausa people, who prayed like the Hausa people, of course, who spoke like the Hausa people. This man who was more Hausa than Okoro led the coup, and because he was from the uh, southeast, he was from the Niger Delta, he was from Delta State. They described that coup as an Igbo coup, that it had an Igbo agenda. And of course, mayhem was loosed against the people of Biafra. Yes, the whole southeast were chased, shot at, maimed, deleted, all from the north, started from the north, chased them all the way from the north, and these people had to run away, scampering for safety. Even when they run back down to Lagos, they were chased again, of course, till they ran down to the southeast, that they thought was their comfort zone. Fortunately, the Nigerian government, orchestrated the civil war and came there and fought them and declared a genocide against the people of Biafra between 1967, 68, 69, 70. Ladies and gentlemen, the conflict resulted from political, ethnic, and cultural tensions, with the Nigerian government imposing a blockade that led to widespread famine and civilian casualties. Ladies and gentlemen, the story of Bruce Mayrock is something that I wish every one of you can write out, get his picture, do an enlargement of him, put it in your library, put it in your home, show your children. Of course, they don't teach history anymore. Show your children, point at him and say, see, that young man, that man who is a moving cannon, burning flames all over him, is not make believe. It's a reality. That man actually set himself ablaze to protest the killing of our fathers, of our mothers, of our children, of our babies, the killing of Biafran children because of a declared genocide against them. He's a hero. Great, great hero. Greatest hero, so to speak, of Biafra. And his name must be immortalized in Biafra. Ladies and gentlemen, I was reliably informed because I didn't take pains to look at that, forgive me, but our able Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Dr. Ngozi Orabueze, has already engraved the portrait of Bruce Mayrock in one of the Biafran pounds, one of the Biafran currencies. Ladies and gentlemen, most of us don't have access to that currency yet because, of course, we are still working towards the full sovereignty of the redeclared United States of Biafra. And when it's achieved by the special grace of Yahweh, when it's achieved, we will all be spending a currency, a means of exchange, where you see the picture, the portrait of this young man who sacrificed his life, who killed himself because he was touched, because he empathized, because he felt, the tears, the pains, the sorrows of Biafran children who were starved, who were mocked. Yes, Great Britain was showing pictures of children with very tiny legs, tiny arms, massive heads, and big tummies. Of course, that was kwashiorkor, an evidence of poor nutrition, starvation, and malnutrition. They were proud to be showing these pictures to the world, saying that this was what, the secessionist people of Biafra brought to themselves because they refused to pay allegiance to the Nigerian government. They refused to maintain one Nigeria, a united Nigeria. Great Britain had the audacity, a wickedness of heart to display these pictures all over the world, calling Biafrans secessionists, hopeless people who were driven, by uh, an unruly ambition to dominate Nigeria. This was what Great Britain told the whole world. This was why everybody turned their eyes away from Biafra. This was why everybody suspected the motive of Biafra, because they thought we had an inordinate ambition to dominate, to ostracize Nigeria, the other regions in Nigeria, and dominate them. But thanks to people like Bruce Mayrock here, who came all out and said, no, this is genocide. No, you can't. You can't be doing this to people. You can't be killing people. You can't declare genocide on human beings. Please. He wrote to senators, United States senators. He wrote to the U.S. president. He wrote to United Nations. He wrote to world leaders. And when they couldn't act, when their ears were deafened by propaganda and manipulation of the United Kingdom press and mass media, of course, Bruce Mayrock had no option other than to take a fatal decision. He set himself ablaze and he died. He died midnight of May 30th, after midnight of May 30th, 1969, due to severe burns, 360 degrees burns all over his body. His sacrifice is worthy of note. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry if when I spoke of Bruce Mayrock initially, I didn't pin it down to this great sacrifice. But I tell you the truth, ladies and gentlemen, freedom lovers, fellow Biafrans, this young man who sacrificed his life, his studies, his booming career as a Jewish theological student needs to be on our lips every day. When we pray to God, when we pray to Yahweh, let's remember Bruce Mayrock, who sacrificed everything, his life, in such a bizarre but fatal display of love, of kindness, of empathy. This man, who was not an African, he was not of Biafran heritage, no, he had nothing to achieve for Biafra, no, but instead, he sacrificed his life to create the much needed attention, to garner the much needed attention from the international communities. And it was at his death that, yes, things began to happen, that world leaders began to look deeply into the Biafran plight, into the situation with Biafra. And that was when they started calling Gowon to order, General Gowon to order. That was when they started calling United Kingdom to say the truth, speak the truth. Why are you aiding and abetting a genocide against, the people of the Southeast, Biafran people? Why are you telling us stories and lies, fabricated stories? Why are you orchestrating this genocide against people who are peaceful, who are loving, who are not violent in any way? Bruce Mayrock achieved in his death what he couldn't achieve while he's alive, even with his letters, even with his placards. He achieved when he set himself ablaze. A very fatal decision, but yes, one that we ought to remember him by. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy it's in the Biafran currency, one of our currencies, a means of exchange, which will vigorously go widespread when the United States of Biafra is fully sovereign and fully achieved. We equally gather now that whatever it is they're building at Enugu, whatever it is that Bianca is, whatever it is she says she's doing, no way. At the full recognition, the full achievement of the United State of Biafra, have been fully, informed that our Deputy Prime Minister has ensured and has promised that Bruce Mayrock will be given a gigantic edifice in the country, in the redeclared United States of Biafra. He'll be given a space that, of course, anybody who looks at it, who sees it, would know that, yes, this man meant well for Biafra. God bless you all until I come your way again. Sorry for any misrepresentations. We are one family. We are together. God bless you all.
Yeah, Biafra, Biafra. Yeah, Superstar Media. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the motherland. Tell me about Biafra. I wanna know. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the motherland. Tell me about Biafra, Biafra. I wanna know. We going back to the land. We going back to the motherland. Biafra, Biafra. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the land. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the motherland. Tell me about Biafra, Biafra. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the land.